Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bettina Klenkler. I'm a program manager at the Ontario Centres of Excellence. I'd like to welcome you all to this final panel session for today, entitled Mobile Healthcare Futures. We're very glad that you could join us today for what promises to be an enlightening and informative panel discussion of the global mobile healthcare industry. This year for Discovery, OCE has partnered with the Mobile Institute to bring you more content than ever before. And with that, I will now turn the podium over to Michael O'Farrell, the founder of the Mobile Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klinkler, and thank you to the Ontario Centres of Excellence and the OCE of having us here in Discovery this year. As mentioned, we put together two series of events in mobile. We had a boot camp on Saturday that was supported through the partnership with the OCE and MEIC and a whole group of partners that we had 80 plus attendees, 15 speakers, and it ended up being up to 34,000 people watching a live webcast of what's happening in Toronto with mobile development. And coming here now, we're very excited, and this is being the last session, as we kept this session as an area to explore the mobile healthcare environment after seeing what Taking Ontario Mobile has to offer, is how do we get to the next generation of understanding what services and requirements are needed to, again, increase the capacity and opportunity for Ontario going mobile. It's a very sensitive topic, and it's very personal, and there's a lot of institutional agendas, and we want to try to pull together the thought leaders to encompass how we can take a look at the dollars and cents of going mobile. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, David Farnes. He's a principal of Farnes and Associates. David has 17 years of experience influencing strategic direction of Canada's wireless industry and 25 years of public policy and regulatory matters in the telecommunications industry. Prior to founding Farnes and Associates, David was Chief Operating Officer at the Canadian Wireless Telecommunications Association. Welcome, David, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Welcome, everyone. I think this is going to be a great panel, and as Michael mentioned, I think it's quite fitting that we're following the Taking Ontario Mobile session that we just listened to. In keeping with the series of tracks that the Mobile Institute put together, we're going to try to approach this session dealing with healthcare with keeping mobile first as our mindset. So it's a mobile first mindset, and we're going to try to imagine what would happen to the delivery of healthcare services if we were to see a greater adoption of mobile technology in that space. Joining me today on the panel, to my immediate right is Dr. Emily Seto. Emily is manager at the Center for Global eHealth Innovation, and they actually have a booth on the floor. Next to Emily is Dr. Shurjeel Choudhri. He's Senior Vice President and Head Medical and Scientific Affairs at Bayer. Next to Shurjeel is Mr. Ken Ono. He's Vice President, Innovation and Commercialization at NexJ Systems, Inc. And finally, we have Alfred Baghouzian, who's Vice President, Devices and Applications with TELUS. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to describe their organizations and give you a little insight into what they're doing, and then we'll get into a bit of a dialogue with the panel. So I don't know whether any of the attendees had a chance to visit the center's booth on the floor, but maybe Emily, could you explain to us what the University Health Network is, and more specifically, what is the Center for Global eHealth Innovation?
Sure. Well, thank you, David. So the Center for Global eHealth Innovation is part of the University Health Network, and the University Health Network consists of 4 different institutions. We have Princess Margaret Cancer Centre, the Toronto Western Hospital, the Toronto Rehab Institute, and the Toronto General Hospital, which is where the center is located. The center is also affiliated with the University of Toronto, and we have a number of researchers and faculty from U of T who have offices and groups that base their research out of the center. At any one time, we have approximately 70 or so scientists, staff, and students who sit at the center as well. So probably most relevant to this session are the groups that are developing and designing mobile applications for chronic disease management. We have a group of human factor specialists at the center, as well as graphic designers who use a user-centered design process. So basically we bring in the end users, be it clinicians or patients, throughout the design process. So that includes user requirements as well as usability testing as we develop the product. The development group we have consists of software as well as hardware designers, developers, and we use the agile development process, and we believe that's the best way for us to do development for the type of research we do. We close the loop with some evaluation just to see how effective our technology is at the end of the day. And these include clinical trials and randomized control trials that we have done a number of already. So these are just a few examples of some of the mobile apps for chronic disease management that we have gone through the entire process with. BANT is a diabetes application for type 1 diabetes, and it allows the patient to monitor their blood glucose. Medley is a platform that we've developed for chronic disease management, and it's used for patients who have more frequent touch with their healthcare providers, so the healthcare providers can get alerts, such as for heart failure patients. Breathe is another app that we developed with a number of partners. It's for asthma patients, and we had partners from the Ontario Lung Association as well as TELUS Health Solutions be part of that project.
Thank you, Emily. So now I'm going to turn to Alfred, who's at the end, and Alfred's with TELUS. And I imagine most of the people in the audience are quite familiar with TELUS. But Alfred, maybe you can explain to us why TELUS has placed such an important emphasis on healthcare.
Very familiar with TELUS as a telco. As a telco, we do move, store, and securely manage the data information across a variety of platforms, devices, and constituencies. Within the healthcare, naturally, that information takes in the form of the patient records, patient information that needs to go to the similar process of being transitioned, stored, and its access securely managed. So we believe that the synergies in these two ecosystems we can leverage them in order to apply the various solutions and assets that we have in the healthcare service delivery arena to turn medical information into meaningless outcomes and eventually to improve the quality of the outcomes of the various processes that today in the healthcare systems are mostly either digital or if they're or paper, and if they're digital, they are basically in the silo. So we're creating that horizontal environment throughout the continuum of health. You're probably familiar with on the health side. I have a video. I'm not sure. Maybe I can about a couple of minutes to describe better. I believe.
Absolutely. Can we cue the video, please?
Healthcare is one of the most important issues to every single Canadian. Approximately 50% of all provincial budgets go towards healthcare, and this figure is growing every year. At the same time, valuable healthcare information often resides within different healthcare provider organizations and in different systems, rarely communicating or connecting with each other. As a result, the system suffers. Canada ranks second to last overall in the Commonwealth Fund's annual review of healthcare performance. Most people agree, Canadian healthcare as it operates today is unsustainable. So what can be done about it? At TELUS, we have identified the top 5 issues where health information and communications technology can make a positive difference. Chronic disease management, where health IT can provide both routine and guideline-based interventions, telehome care, and patient self-monitoring. Medication management, where tools to prevent adverse reactions and provide patients with education will help with improving drug compliance. Better access, by connecting disparate systems and enabling care coordination with collaborative services such as electronic referrals. Prevention and self-care, providing online tools to help individuals maintain healthier lifestyles, understand their risks for chronic disease, and to modify their behaviors in order to mitigate those risks. Performance improvement, through the acceleration of EMR adoption as well as cost savings through improved public health. At TELUS, we understand the complexity of healthcare and the needs of health practitioners and patients. And we have the consulting services, telecom infrastructure, advanced health applications, integration platforms, consumer tools, and collaborative relationships within the industry to address them. We mobilize electronic health records for the efficient sharing of information between care providers whenever and wherever they need it. We empower physicians with electronic medical records to support evidence-based assessment and treatment, and to connect them to regional healthcare resources and to their patients. Telehealth and home monitoring solutions connect patients to their health teams and teach them how to proactively manage their condition. We empower Canadians with personal health records to help shift the focus from remediation to prevention. And we do this by delivering the efficient, effective, and secure movement and storage of information across multiple platforms, devices, and communities. By addressing the top 5 issues where health information and communications technology can make a positive difference, TELUS can help improve outcomes for all Canadians. In fact, that's our goal, to help turn information into better health outcomes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. Ken, maybe you could explain to us a little bit about NexJ systems, and in particular their healthcare services or solutions group, and really what is the impact of your cloud-based platform on improving the health of Canadians?
Sure. So are my slides on there? Or? It's okay, don't worry about it. So
can we cue the slides, please?
So NexJ Systems is a cloud-based software platform provider that provides systems to financial services, insurance, and healthcare. We were founded in 2003. For 3 consecutive years, we were the fastest growing company in Canada. And we've done about 50 million in open innovation collaborative projects between ourselves, other companies, and our academic partners. Our principal focus on our healthcare division is around people-centered health, which puts people in control of their health and their wellness. The principles for people-centered health that people need to be informed about their condition, they need to be educated about the alternative treatments and how to manage wellness, and essentially responsible for decisions regarding health and wellness. To enable people-centered healthcare, we're providing a platform called the Connected Wellness Platform, which is a cloud-based platform for improving health and wellness. It's very much targeted at chronic disease management. Today's system is very much geared towards acute care, which is a very expensive system. And to effectively manage chronic care, the focus we're taking is really about patients managing their own health and wellness. In order to do that effectively, the Connected Wellness Platform allows patients to connect. And when we say connect, we mean both to their healthcare information as well as to their collaborative care team. And we use that term very broadly. It's not just healthcare providers, it's also the friends and families that provide a huge amount of the actual care that's provided today. Communicate with both through secure messaging, but also around the shared health record, and in some very formalized ways, such as automated scheduling, just simply having a patient book their own patients online, transitional care management, and essentially self-assessment form fills, and so on and so forth. We also see health coaching as a very important part of the overall solution, where chronic disease management is essentially managed by people who are coping with the condition. And to effectively do that, a huge part of it is around being active and eating better and medication adherence. And those things are actually very hard. So we need the necessary support and the necessary business models to enable that support to help that to happen. And of course, wellness is about, allows for reduced medications, reduced complications, reduced readmissions, and so on and so forth, ultimately leading to improved patient outcomes.
Thanks, Ken. Now I'm going to call upon Shurjeel, who's got a treat for us. He's going to show us one of the apps his team has developed.
Thanks, David. Let me just take a second to log into my device here. Perfect. So I'll start by saying Bayer, I think everybody knows Bayer, at least from aspirin, maybe from the one-a-day vitamins, but we also have a fairly large pharmaceutical portfolio, and it's increasingly in specialty products. And that means that the information that the physician gets, and often what the patient gets, can be quite complicated. And one of the goals we had was to use mobile technology to try to simplify so that healthcare providers can get the information that they need very quickly and yet get the right information. Because if the product that I'm going to demonstrate now, if you were to actually read the product label, it runs to almost 100 pages. And you can imagine if a physician sitting in the office, they have maybe 4 or 5 minutes at most to see that patient. They simply can't go through it all. So the goal of this was really to allow for a healthcare provider to get to the information they need in less than 30 seconds. And if you look at the device and we can count the number of clicks, you sort of pick what you're going to use it for. It quickly tells you where you should not use it. And anytime, if they want to get more information, they can click on an arrow. It takes them to the actual product label so they can get that information. But if there's none of those contraindications that apply, then there's a couple of key things that they need to know about the patient, the age, their kidney function, and if they don't know, there's a calculator that helps them calculate it. And then there's certain drug interactions that are important, and we basically highlighted them here so you can just pick the ones that are important, finish, and in one screen, that physician now knows what the recommended dose is, which is 15 milligrams once a day. There's a caution. And then if they want to know what the caution is, it actually, everything that applies to that patient in that 100 pages of label is now on one screen. It's taken us maybe 15 seconds. And similarly, if they now have that patient coming back and that patient has a problem, you want to manage that problem. And rather than read that 100 pages, you sort of say, okay, I've got a problem, and I need to really look about switching this patient to another medication. And it quickly just pulls up exactly what they need. So, we estimate there's about 2,000 physicians who actively prescribe a specialty product like this. This app has been downloaded about 1,400 times. So we know that a majority of those physicians have at least tried it. And then we've built in some calculators that I won't go into. But the challenge we had is that Canada, there's no guidance right now from Health Canada on how to develop these health apps. So we've used the FDA guidance as a template. It is a web app so that if there's important health information, we can update this instantly. And if you were to log in the first time, you would actually get that information before you can use the app. And also with the web app, it means we don't have to go through the iTunes or any other store approval process. So this app can be delivered to the physician by just giving them the URL where they can actually go to get to the app and just download it as an icon onto their device. Now, this is just one of the apps we've done. The other one that we started with was to help our sales force report adverse events. And the challenge we have is that the rules for reporting adverse events are quite strict. There's a very strict timeline. What we found was that if the sales force, they ran into an adverse event, traditionally they would have sent us a fax, but often faxes, you can't even read what they've put there. Or they would send it by email, but it was not structured, so often there wasn't enough information there to know what was actually going on. And we created a simple web app that you can use on any device, whether it's a BlackBerry or an iPhone. And basically what it does is it won't let them hit that send button until they've entered all the key variables that are needed to define that adverse event. What we're working on now, taking this approach that I've just shown you, and you know, how many of you have gone to a pharmacy to pick up a prescription? So how many actually got the actual label that is intended for the patients as part of that prescription? So you picked up the bottle. I think there's one hand. So what we found is that, you know, we have a very extensive label, but that last part is never actually delivered to the patient by the pharmacy. Often they print out something that is in their database, but it's not actually the approved label. And we're basically developing something now. This is for healthcare providers, but it would run exactly the same way. But it takes that information that is for the patient in that label and allows the patient to quickly get to the information they need for their drug. And it will greatly simplify you know, getting the relevant information out of those 100 pages. And you can imagine this is one product, but our specialty cancer products, the labels are very long. And the precautions, the warnings, the drug interactions are all in different places. So by having an app like this, what you can do is instantly give you what you actually need to know for yourself based on your characteristics, or for the healthcare provider based on what their characteristics are. The final thing, and this is something that we hope to roll out at the end of this year, there's always questions that are not in the label that physicians ask or the pharmacists may need to know. And typically they call into our medical information department. They usually go through the standard corporate maze of hitting 1 to 1 to get to the right line. And then they ask their question, and eventually we fax them or email them a response. But the responses are all digital, and we're developing an app where they can actually ask their question on their app. It'll search for the right response and send it to them right away, and they can read it on their device. So that's basically all of these. The common theme is we want to take what is complex and deliver it to the healthcare providers or the patients in a really simple way. So thank you.
Hey, that's on the floor. Yeah. Okay, so now your appetites must be whet. So let's get into our discussion. And when I moderate sessions, I enjoy participation from the audience early on in the discussion. So if something's piqued your interest right now, feel free to walk up to a microphone and join the discussion right away if you want to. But let me kick things off with Emily and the rest of the panel. How can mobile technology improve the customer experience for Ontarians?
So I think there's a number of different ways that it can improve customer experience. There are things such as having patients being able to book their visits online or getting reminders on their cell phone, that sort of thing. But I think much more exciting is the transformative power that mobile technology can bring. And there could be a huge shift in the way that the healthcare system actually works. And by this I mean, wouldn't it be great if the patients could do a lot more of the self-care at home? And I think that everybody would probably agree that the worst place a patient can be is in a hospital. except for in acute situations, right? They get sicker in a hospital. So if we're talking about people with chronic diseases, giving them the tools through mobile technology to actually improve their self-care for one thing, and they can monitor a lot of different physiological parameters through mobile technology now, and including we're looking at M-band, so mobile body area networks, where you can use activity monitors. We're building an EEG, an ECG that uses a phone as a hub, right? So you can monitor these people for extended periods of time for both treatment and for diagnostics. So I think there's a huge transformative power of mobile technology. And even looking in terms of the clinicians, they have now mobile phones, and most of them carry them around in the hospital. So, if we could reduce the number of times that patients have to go to clinic, I think everybody wins. I had a situation in one of our trials where one of our cardiologists actually got an alert on the beach while she was sitting in Bermuda. And she got on her phone, she got the alert on the phone, she called the patient from the beach. Now, I'm not suggesting that all physicians do this, and I'm sure they won't. But it's just an example of what, how healthcare can be transformed through mobile technology.
Shurjeel?
No, I completely agree. I think if you just look at the sheer number of apps that are available now for patients to monitor their heart rate, their patches for monitoring heart rhythm, it's much, much better to have that patient being monitored at home than to have them come into the hospital to get the same thing done. And you can actually go to the Apple Store and get a blood pressure cuff that actually takes a reading that feeds into your phone. And we know that blood pressure monitoring at home is better actually than in a doctor's office. I think the other thing that the apps can do, and I demonstrated that a little bit, is there's literally a flood of information on the internet. And often physician or patient, when they go there, it's not clear what is relevant and what is not. And I think you can deliver that information in a really focused way through an app so that they get just the relevant information. And also, I think important for us, they get the Canadian information. Because most people who go on the web and search a drug, the information you're getting is not Canadian label. It is what's approved in the US or Europe. So you can actually make sure that what the patients are seeing are relevant for Canada and what's approved here. And I think that's also very important.
Ken?
Sure. Well, I certainly echo the comments before. And it's getting less and less controversial, and I think people are really turning the corner in terms of understanding that the changes that are happening are necessary for sustainability in the healthcare system. So I think the conversation then moves to how does one really leverage all these opportunities. Electronic messaging to physicians is new and scary to most physicians who can barely keep on top of their workload. So how do we leverage that technology in such a way that actually benefits the doctors? And there are ways of doing it. It's not hard. It's a question of discovering the right approaches and applying it. And there certainly is, I think the ultimate benefit is really the reduction on load to the formal healthcare system because people are being more responsible. And the most important mobile technologies are the ones that enable that and accelerate that.
I mean, Emily mentioned, SMS or text messaging, maybe not the most exciting piece of the pie here, but it's very important, whether that's reminders for appointments or reminders to take medication. That's a very important component. And we certainly, in some of the other sessions today, we heard, even from an enterprise standpoint, it's how do I work that text messaging delivery into my overall work process and workflow, and that must be obviously a challenge for doctors. Alfred, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll definitely echo my colleagues here, and I would add to access to information in order to get informed patients, informed about their own healthcare and their status. I recently had my own experience recently with one of my family members is just to get information, things that are relevant. Access to information is really critical. Mobiles provide that ease of use and that platform for accessing such information. And I think definitely the user experience part also involves both relevancy of the information as well as a trusted source of information. There is definitely, I echo, there is a lot of information out there, may not be relevant or may not be trusted source. I think that is important. It is also as important in the mobile environment, as you mentioned earlier, to make it mobile first, because the mobility environment requires the 80-20 rule, 80% value, 20% of the use cases. I think we tend to also reproduce to some extent that over information that there is, even if it's trusted and relevant, onto the mobile. And I think a lot of the times patients just want to have what is the next step immediately before I walk into the doctor's office. I want to know what questions will be asked, what questions should ask. And it is the experience of getting into and out of a healthcare provider or a clinic. It is sometimes it could be very daunting for some of the patients who are going through some difficult conditions.
I mean, you hit on a key thing with the issue of trust. I was interested when you mentioned that your app is you make your app available through a link, so people don't go to the app store. But as we see apps emerge for consumers to use, there will have to be a level of trust that they know that they're getting a reputable app for their healthcare service. We have a taker from the audience, so let's go to microphone number 1 and get the audience engaged right away.
Hello, thank you. This question I think is directed first to Dr. Choudhri and maybe to Mr. Ono and maybe to the others too. But in terms of, you've developed an app, I think we all say, great, we can really see the value. How are you measuring the efficacy of that app? What metrics are you using to determine whether or not the app is effective and where it's effective?
It's a great question. At the moment, the only metrics we're looking at is the usability and how many physicians who prescribe the drug are actually using the app. I guess the next question is it doing what it is supposed to do? The only way we measured that is we did focus groups and we did pilot testing with both specialists and physicians. And it was amazing, actually, the reaction we got, because they looked at it and said, this is exactly what we've been looking for, because it really helps us. And we've demonstrated it to Health Canada, and one of the colleagues at Health Canada said, well, can you do it for every product monograph? Because, again, what we struggle with is we develop now product labeling that becomes very, very complex. So anything that can simplify and really highlight the key aspects is valuable. The final outcome, going back to the users to see how they like it, I think that's something we have to do.
Right. And I guess to see how many times that there's been a counterindication that's been uncovered because of this, because, those sorts of things I think are very valuable.
Exactly. I think that user experience, we definitely have to go back and collect, because what we're looking for now is doing something very similar for some of our other specialty products. So the lessons learned here are going to be very valuable.
Thank you.
Maybe some of the other panelists can comment. I mean, Emily, you're developing apps, and
yes.
How are you measuring them?
So this is very dear to my heart, because I spend many years actually doing trials to try to confirm the efficacy or define the efficacy of our apps. And we've done a number of even randomized control trials, so the gold standard, right, in science, comparing a control group and an intervention group. And in cases, we've often found that with the apps, even things such as, like blood markers are improved. So their health outcomes are improved by using this. And, diving deeper, we also obviously do some qualitative analysis trying to figure out why, right? And so when we talk to, the clinicians and the patients, we see that there's a correlation between now they understand, if I eat Kentucky Fried Chicken yesterday, my weight's going to go up for heart failure, right? And, I start to feel lousy, right? So again, there's a whole lifestyle behavior change that comes from that. So I think that, to answer your question, I think that, if you want evidence, we could find you the evidence, right? And honestly, I think that, if you design it right and you come up with the right features, some of these apps can really change the health outcomes and save costs through less hospitalization, et cetera. The trick really is to make a sustainable program, right? I think that's the hard part after you find the evidence.
I was just going to add, there was a paper published just last week that a weight loss app resulted in significantly more weight loss in the patients who were using that compared to a control group. So I think they clearly work.
Right. So it is there. I was just asking if you explicitly do measure that, because there is value in knowing that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly.
Alfred?
Yeah.
Or Ken,
I
go.
will just add, I mean, we often, whenever we do any trials or pilots, we tend to create feedback loops that they're actually more provider-centric. In our experience, first of all, a lot of the pilots we involve, naturally we have the user-centric design, user experience, but we also involve a pilot set of customers as well as users. The key point is also build that feedback loop that is the patients. I think getting patient feedback today the mobile enables getting real-time patient feedback or customer feedback that is as valuable as a feedback loop as it is, because traditionally most of the trials or evaluations have been unidirectional. I think there have been feedback loop in terms of the providers to get feedback, but not necessarily to actually provide that some of the feedback of the results, so the patients themselves can actually not necessarily diagnose, but provide additional input. Oh yeah, I did have that Kentucky Fried Chicken that I didn't report yesterday. Maybe that is what they are.
Mm-hmm. Ken, did you want to comment?
Sure. I think the idea of measuring the benefits is actually a critical step in the commercialization process. And one of the things that we do and actively design into our innovation processes is these trials where we partner with a healthcare provider who are going to provide the clinical expertise. We'll partner with an academic partner who's going to be a co-author on the paper, typically with our clinical partner. And we see that, one, we obviously don't want to sell snake oil. We only want to sell stuff that is actually good. And it also is necessary to prove the benefit. So if we can reference, yes, this intervention was written up in the whatever journal, that's very helpful. Just looking at it from a marketing from a marketing perspective. And the other thing, and this may be somewhat unique to the way we're going to market, is the other thing that we keep a very close eye on is what is the benefit from a financial perspective to the healthcare provider. So while everyone can agree that's great if patients can be more engaged and stuff like that, well, how is that? Why is somebody going to elect to use a system like that? So when we're as a consumer, I would love it if I could go in and go to a website and book my next appointment with my GP. Shouldn't be that hard. Why would a GP do that? Well, it's because they have less burden on their administrative staff, because you're actually providing better service at lower cost. Oh, lower cost. Oh, okay. So I think it's very important to measure it in such a way that the stakeholders can actually use that information to make a decision, and often that comes down to cost management.
Thank you very much to all of you.
So it's interesting, our panel represents, each of you represent an organization involved in a different part of the delivery of mobile healthcare, let's say, mobile healthcare, but you don't represent the entire continuum. When the question came up about validating the results of an app, you each had an answer. Is there enough collaboration across the system in not only evaluation of new technologies, new services, new apps, but even in the development of it? Alfred, maybe I'll start with you.
There's always room for more collaboration, I think, across this industry. We have come to realize that, as earlier to an earlier panel, there was discussion in terms of how mobile has lowered the barriers, has created that horizontal level in order for a lot of these organizations that used to be in silo to have to collaborate and build the communication channel. So definitely there is room to have a lot of community care providers also involved in some of the just to get the patient feedback. But I mean, we do work very much with the agencies, the government, the local and provincial care providers. But collaboration, I think, in this new world, it is. I think part of it is a trend in terms of like a social media-based trend to where people want to share information. But this is more organized. And I'm not referring to just mobility as a social media, but really more forums where, similar to today, is where there is facilitate and help support more collaboration across industry. And some of the things we just don't know. There are parties of the ecosystem that they were not part of the value chain. They were consuming the outcome of the healthcare industry, but they were not necessarily part of it contributing it.
Ken, your thoughts on collaboration?
I had two principal thoughts on it. I think what really is the right formula is really a project-based approach to collaboration, where collaboration can come across as very sort of general and abstract, but when there's a specific challenge that's being put to a cross-section of experts and stakeholders, then defining a particular project that discreetly advances it from A to B really sort of is a very practical way of approaching it. So really, I think that the key to improvement is really sort of this project bounding for innovation. The other thing, just the question itself, I mean, that sort of implies that we have all these fixed stakeholders in the system that are coming together to provide, a solution to the problem. What that misses is the new systems that have to emerge. We aren't really structured the right way now. So if you only look to the current the current organizations, you're potentially missing the larger real disruptions which are really executing in an emerging system, which a lot of this patient-centric stuff is all about anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shurjeel?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with what has been said. There's definitely room for improvement in collaboration. I think a number of challenges, because this field is just emerging, that we will have to deal with is that there aren't guidances, and the FDA has a draft guidance, there's nothing in Canada. Some of the apps already impinge on what would normally be a device that Health Canada approves. But you can deliver that same functionality in an app which doesn't go through that approval. And just this week, the FDA has sent a warning letter to a company that had marketed a device, not an app, but the FDA considers a device for reading glucose strips. So I think we will need better regulation, we will need guidelines, but also we will need more collaboration across the different groups that are developing apps. I think between regulators, industry, healthcare providers, just to make sure also that we're not duplicating efforts. We're not coming out with 50 of the same. And there I think collaboration would be very beneficial.
Emily, I don't know whether you want to address collaboration or regulation or approvals or advice.
Yeah, I think there's a number of interesting aspects that were brought up by my colleagues here. But maybe just to touch on something, just to kind of reiterate what Ken was talking about. I think one of the key players, which I think need to be at the table, really are the people who fund or implement and sustain some of this technology, right? And I think it's true that if we're really trying to do something transformative and disruptive, it doesn't fit in the workflow. And so in order to do this, and we've been struggling with this, with our groups, we've went through the whole process of proving that there's some benefit to clinicians or to the patients, usually to both. And yet we can't seem to implement it. And aligning the incentives for hospitals or clinics or whatever, it's not an easy task because the way that our healthcare model is, it doesn't fit that scheme. So I think we need to bring in people who do the government to do the policies, make things easier for us to bill, make the incentives align so that if the hospitals are reducing hospital stays, do the hospitals actually benefit? And usually the answer is no, right? So maybe they should.
Right. Question for microphone number 2.
I just have 2 quick, very targeted questions. So the first one's to Emily. As a University of Waterloo student, is there any opportunity to even speak to people from your group or get involved in some way? And if so, how would that work?
Yes, you could email me.
Okay.
And depending on what your interests are, I mean, we do collaborate with all kinds of different groups. And again, we have to see if there's synergies and projects that kind of align with what we're doing and our philosophy. Right?
I mean, if I were to come to you with an idea, is there someone I can speak to there, or?
It would probably funnel back to me, actually.
Okay, all back to you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Somehow it always ends up in my email box. So
all right, I'll definitely get your card then after this. And then the second question is to Ken. I think I'm a little bit unclear about what NexJ Systems does. I saw that you solve a lot of the problems that I think anybody trying to create a company in healthcare is, which is like being able to share things securely. And I'm just wondering, is your company a platform for other companies to build on, or is it a solution just in and itself, like you build your healthcare solutions yourselves?
It's both.
Okay.
So we can't be purely a platform. Mm-hmm. So it's almost, if you think about Xbox, yep, their biggest game is Halo, which is a Microsoft game developer. Mm-hmm. So we absolutely do want to attract partners. As part of our open innovation strategy, we have a finite development staff, and we can only do so much. So we release APIs and encourage parties to develop, and are eager to set up revenue sharing arrangements where either content or apps or whatever can be jointly brought to market. But on the other hand, we're very new as a platform, so we have to do a lot of our stuff ourselves. We just can't rely on partnerships alone. Mm-hmm. So we have to be good out of the box as well.
Okay, thank you.
Question number one here.
Yeah, I'm gradually getting some answers to the question I wanted to put, but it involves a project, which I guess is a way of encouraging collaboration. Context is arguably the most significant chronic, accessible, untreated condition in North America. It's got to do with hearing. So if you can't hear me, please say you can't hear me. People often say that. Whole context here, the industry is ineffective. It's not trending toward what it should be doing, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole backstory here. And the stakes are growing. It's not just old people, it's kids. A significant incidence of special ed is based on hearing acquisition earlier on, language acquisition. A very significant over 40 population. The kids are using earphones and so on, and we have an issue. There's 45 million people, maybe 50 in North America. That is the largest chronic problem that's untreated, in my view. I think that's accurate. So one of the affiliations I have is with Stanford. But I don't know if you're familiar with Stanford Medicine X. I think it's the most significant node in the world for e-patientry in Silicon Valley. It's in year 3. And I'm connected with that. And the issue has to do with, hell, we're in Canada, and there's stuff going on in the Valley. And for example, there's platforms there and cross-platforms and apps coming out of your every possible place, etc. There's diabetes alone. There's 6 apps that were just presented last September, etc., etc., etc. An awful lot going on. But to a person who has a project, I'm enabling. I mean, our mantra is enable the tribe and speed the journey. We are talking to TELUS, beginning to. That's helpful and may progress. I don't know anything about your platform, but it sounds like I don't have to run to the Valley and try and find a bunch of people to put one together. I don't think. And I know a little bit about the health, the collaborations going on in this city for some time for various reasons. But when you talk about human factors and projects and everything, I say, yeah, I mean, that seems to be part of the equation. I don't know how to access it, though, and I don't know.
So is that your question, how to access?
Yeah,
this?
what little advice would be helpful for something like that?
I mean, I'd love to answer that. I think basically, I think the answer is just do it, and to start small. At NexJ, I've led a number of projects, and recently our major partner was granted a $15.5 million award from the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. We didn't start out ever expecting something at that scale would be accessible to us. We started out really just by connecting to researchers that had an academic interest in some of the same areas, and we learned that health coaching was critical. We
Yes.
learned that
Amen.
chronic disease management was critical, and that diabetes was probably the most addressable and important, great
Yes.
sort of square one to start with our wellness solutions. And we didn't have any government funding when we started. We just started having our developers work with our academic experts. And then I started to learn the alphabet soup of the various funding agencies, and we got a small grant from HTX, which was a great catalyst. We did some wireless device integration with Emily's group, and then we continually built on that, and over time I would still see this big project award that we have as still just the beginning. So it's really just a question of having the vision and the passion, and you obviously have the passion, and just come to conferences like this, start connecting the dots, and keep going. Be agile, adjust your vision where it's not working, and keep going.
Okay, so I think we have time for another question. Microphone number 2.
Hi. What are your concerns that bureaucracy and regulatory approval could slow down innovation?
That's a great question. I like that question. Who wants to start that one first?
If I could just give a couple examples, actually. One would be, like, how would you feel about something like a public-private partnership in the form of an advertising-supported patient record app, just as an example? And another concern might be, would patient records, how comfortable would the government be about having that stuff in the cloud, or would it have to be physically locked down? Just a couple examples.
So maybe I'll just kind of start, and I think maybe what you're kind of alluding to is maybe like some of the things that are related to privacy and that sort of thing. So, I think it's important, obviously, in healthcare that we keep patient information as private and confidential as possible. But I do think that sometimes it's used as an excuse more than anything else. We've looked at pretty much in the banking industry, right? And there was a really interesting study that was done at the beginning of the year, and they basically surveyed 1,500 Canadians, asking them what are they concerned about in terms of privacy. Banking, financial was number 1, and dead last was healthcare information, right? Which was really interesting. It was below marketing information, like when you buy things and that kind of thing. So I'm not saying by any means that healthcare information is not important or that we need we shouldn't keep it secure, but I think we should keep in perspective, of what the values are in terms of what Canadians want, and the technology is there, right? So I don't see that as a barrier, really. I really do think that other industries have worked on this for much longer, and the solutions are out there, and we just need to adopt them.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the first app we created for patients was for the hemophilia patients to record the use of blood products, and that information could be conveyed directly to their hemophilia nurse. That was done over 10 years ago. And I think if privacy can be addressed, the other thing is you do need some regulation so that that there's a certain standard established. And the patient apps we have apps that help patient adhere to their medication, for example. If it's related to a specific product, Health Canada does require that they know the code on the box that they can enter in order to access the app. But it's really not been a problem. And so I think you can do a lot, even with the current regulations. There is some need for guidance, though, for some of the new applications that are coming out that are really being used for diagnostic purposes, including, there's a number of apps that will give you your heart rate. Well, you want to make sure that they are validated so that they are giving you the right information. And there, I think we don't have enough regulation yet.
I would just add, I think regulatory environments or bodies are going to be always behind the market trends. I think there's a fine balance in terms of to keep between what's being regulated and mandated as to compliance. Again, I'm not the I'm not a doctor, I don't have the background on that, but if you look at the trend going on, I think there has to be room for guidance provided by regulator. I think more guidelines, best practices, rather than regulation of what mandatory compliance. The reality, if you look at what's happening today in the privacy arena for the personal data south of the border with Homeland Security and the federal government in the US, they have resources, a tremendous amount of resources allocated in providing guidelines, best practices, and how you use your smartphone, how you use your different applications in order to be, they're basically making it a buyer beware approach. I'm not saying there is no need to make it regulatory, but I think it has to be a fine balance between guidance and practices that are to be provided. I think that's probably a first step. There will be a learning process as well, rather than waiting until they have a strict regulation of guidance. So in this case, specifically the measurements for glucose meter, there should be guidance in terms of what to look for, get a second opinion, do not necessarily rely on this one if there are certain, et cetera, but making it sure that to ensure that those measurements are compliant to certain standards that, according to FDA, it takes 3 years to build the application, if it's a class, whatever the classification they have in their framework. It is not just simply not sustainable in the new market reality.
Kenny, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we found as we were building our applications is that when we looked at some of the Health Canada certification, it was kind of foggy whether it would apply to us. But we took the position that if it doesn't now, it probably will in the future, and it frankly probably should. So we went through the whole process of making our software a Class 2 medical device. I wouldn't say it slowed down. I mean, it is work, but it does, in many ways, it's very helpful in the sense that it forced us to formalize things that we were talking about earlier, like the customer feedback process. It is part of our company processes, and we're audited to ensure that we do have this customer feedback loop, because that's part of the ISO quality processes that you would need to demonstrate that you have in order to get your Health Canada license. And that's fine. I think, has it slowed innovation? Don't think so, really. It's added some costs, but it's good costs. Right. And so I would take that perspective.
Okay, great.
Well, that's a great question to end on. I think we're out of time, unfortunately, so would everyone please join me in thanking Emily, Shurjeel, Ken, and Alfred. And I'd like to thank the Mobile Institute for putting on this track, and I know the Ontario Centres of Excellence has parting gifts for our speakers. Thank you.
I'm just getting another slide up here for us. I'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Emily Seto, Dr. Shurjeel Choudhri, Ken Ono, and Alfred from joining us from TELUS, and for sharing today's thoughts. And we're really seeing that there's an important dialogue that's happening with mobile healthcare, and we're just starting the conversation. And I'd really like to thank, extend a special thanks to David Farnes for putting together the panel and leading it for us today and keeping us on track. As a gesture of appreciation, we have a gift from the Ontario Centres of Excellence for you all. And I'd like to thank the audience for spending their time this afternoon at the end of Discovery to further explore where mobile healthcare futures are going. And it's a new wave that we should all be actively getting involved with, and it's an area that we should all be trying to see what we can do within our policies, with our governments, with our public and private sectors, and also the research that you may be interested in doing to drive the next innovations. And we welcome that opportunity to share with OCE, with ourselves, and the people at Discovery. The next part we're going to be doing is just some closing, so we'll just finish off with yourselves. Yep. Thank you for joining us again. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Oh, did you? I was just lucky I got was first, right? I got a lucky position. Like mine.
I had to scramble. It's like, oh, she said that. What am I gonna
So I'd like to thank everybody, in just closing, I'd like to thank everybody for helping out. I'd like to thank Ontario Centres of Excellence for their support on putting together the first Mobile Innovations at Discovery series of events and activities. We did a couple of amazing things at Discovery this year. We mobilized the whole event with the support of EventMobi and on SMS for the text messaging in the campaign on every sign for people to get information on booths. Instead of doing a native app, we did a mobile web app that worked on every device with the support of EventMobi, and we found that hopefully you got a chance to experience and enjoy that capability. A little bit about ourselves. We do an accelerator that helps businesses move their business ideas further along in the mobile continuum. We don't fund businesses. We help them get more educated and more experienced and more knowledge to mentor and help them further grow in the global landscape. We do education, partnering, as well as presentations and publishing. And one of the events that we put on this weekend that you may or may not have been aware of or part of is we held a Mobile Biz Boot Camp where we had 80 plus people who come to the second city in Toronto. We had 15 plus speakers all talking about the mobile development and mobile apps. And we had 34,000 people in streaming. So we had up to 2,000 people at one time watching how the next innovations in mobile could be discovered through this event and through this opportunity out of Toronto to try to get Toronto more and Ontario more invigorated in the mobile economy. And we'd like to thank our sponsors that supported that as well, from TELUS, Wavefront. And then Wavefront, I don't know if you heard of Wavefront. Wavefront is the wireless center of excellence across Canada. And they are now going province to province, and there's a team that was here. They have lab facilities and device facilities for you to try and build out more and more applications and services. They have a dedicated machine-to-machine symposium and summit and a whole series of advisory services for small startups and mid-sized companies that are trying to enter the mobile environment. So it's a great opportunity to get involved with them. On SMS, we're finding out that SMS is one of the growing channels and still one of the most popular channels that gives ubiquity and touch to every consumer and every person in the world. So again, we thank them for their support. And we had a great couple of sessions while we were here. And we really want to thank the people at Ontario Centres of Excellence for their support, for everybody's time and attention in attending the sessions that we hosted to here over the last couple of days. And specifically, there's a couple of people on our team. Murray McKercher, who's sitting over at the end there, if you want to stand up, Murray, and then it's late in the day. He was the pioneer that helped us bring in the connected car from QNX, as well as some other initiatives that we pulled together. And all the local developer communities, Murray was to pull together and get their support of helping promote what we're doing at Discovery here today. So I'd like to thank you, Murray, for your help on the team. And there's still some other team members walking the floor trying to help people out with mobile, and especially Martin Lord, who's behind here, still in a discussion with a few people, but Martin Lord was very helpful in supporting us and pulling this together with the Discovery and OCA people team. Peter McFaysden, again, he was anchor, and you might have seen him walking around, the most calm, cool and collected person I've ever seen in my life running this type of size show with over 2,000 people and 300 booths. So again, I'd like to thank him and thank everybody for their participation. And the one thing you got to remember leaving here is going mobile is global. There's 7.1 billion mobile consumers in the world, and they're all carrying a device just like we are, and all open to the information, services, and new ideas that we can bring in the mobile innovation category. So again, thank you very much. Have a great night, great weekend, and we'll see you next year at Discovery.